Hello there, Qckslvrslash, and today we have a video courtesy of Porscheracer driving the Tier 9 German cruiser, the Roon. And, you know, once the Baltimore gets its fire buff in the patch that is now live, I think it's really going to be on par with this ship. But right now, the Roon is probably one of the kind of trolliest ships out there because, you know, in a gunfight with the Baltimore, it just out DPMs it. It's got great range, it's got the hydro, sure it doesn't have the radar, but it's got trolley armor. And if you know how to play this ship well, the fact that two of its turrets are in its butt doesn't really seem to affect you too much, and you can get them into the action. And, you know, that's a big part of it, is making sure all your guns are firing. And, you know, in something like the Baltimore, it's easy enough to go bow in, because 60% of your firepower right up front. You know, you don't have to worry too much about losing that rear gun, whereas in this, if you just go bow in, you're sacrificing a lot of your firepower, which means, in a way, maybe you want to run, but the backs of these ships don't seem to ricochet shells quite as well as the front, which means you need to kind of play a more hybrid game style and, you know, get all three turrets firing in positions where things don't really have a chance to fire back at you. And Porsche is going to do a pretty good job of that this game, and this map really does lend itself well to the Roon. I know my best game that I shared with you guys a while back on this ship came on this map, and I think the island heights, the density of the islands just all really feed in quite well to this ship's playstyle. And honestly, this is actually one of my favorite maps right now. I just find there's a lot you can do, even if you're down on ships. There's always ways to come back in the fight that some other maps just don't present, and that Fletcher's about to get wrecked. He's down. One less ship to worry about on the enemy team. And, you know, right now, Porsche's in a pretty good spot. Not a lot can shoot at him, nothing can see him, and he can fire all three of his guns, so he's got no reason to move. He can start working over this Baltimore, and just look at the rate of fire on these guns. Now consider that, you know, really this and the Baltimore kind of can put out the same kind of damage, but then you throw on the torpedoes and some of the extra bits to this. The fact that it shoots 5 seconds faster than the current Baltimore is a little ridiculous, and it'll still have about a 1.5 second lead after the patch goes live. Of course, one of the Roon's downsides is its size. It is a fairly big cruiser, you know, not massive like say the Mogami is at tier 8, but it is a big cruiser, which makes it a little bit bigger of a target. And part of me thinks it has that little bit of a fire buff, or fire rate buff, simply because it's a little harder to use with the guns in the back. So statistically, players will do a little less damage on average with it, so over time its stats wound up as they are. And it's worth noting that's kind of how balancing in these games work. You know, in one instance it might not seem like a half second or a couple percent buff to a ship seems like that much, but over the thousands and millions of games getting played, it can really bring ships, statistically at least, onto par with one another. Now of course you're always going to wind up with a ship that you feel just fits your playstyle better, and you really key in with it. An early example for me was the Qckslvrslash. I just couldn't seem to do wrong in that ship. I'd get into it and just start ripping other ships apart. But I know a lot of people who really didn't like it, and just as many who did. So, you know, when someone tells you a ship is great, don't necessarily take their word for it. Understand that they love it for whatever reasons they do, but you're allowed to have your own. And it's a little unfortunate that so far this game hasn't been very dynamic, but I promise you that is going to change. And at least it's given me a bit of time to talk. So obviously early on they managed to get Alpha and Bravo, but there's no way they're going to contest Alpha. That MA team just seems to be pushing in, so I really feel getting Charlie's important. And what do we have here? Looks like an AFK cruiser? Perhaps a disconnect. I can't quite see what his guns are doing. And, I mean, the Hindenburg is the Roon with an extra gun. And it can be troll as anything. So with just the Moskva seemingly over there, possibly a destroyer, there's one battleship. If you could get, you know, his division mate in AR-1391 and maybe one of these battleships to join him and push into sea, I really think they can take it, and, you know, it'll make up for the fact that they've lost A. Meanwhile, the rest of the ships can kind of sit behind the island here and just slow down the push and slowly whittle away at the health of all these guys pushing. So at least that's kind of what I'd be looking to do right now in this situation. And, well, looks like at least Porsche and AR-1391 are on the same wavelength, which is good because they're in a division, so you'd hope they can agree on a plan together. And honestly, the biggest advantage of a division is the fact that you can coordinate in this manner. So, knowing how divs often work and what would be very strong in this situation, I feel like what's probably going to happen at some point here is AR is going to lay a nice big smoke screen and Porsche is going to set up in it and just start doing some damage. I could be wrong there because it does look like AR is maybe trying to hunt down that enemy destroyer and possibly is spotted. It's hard to know not seeing what's happening for them. But either way, this Tirpitz is making themselves an easy target for Porsche to start ripping apart and try to ruin their day. And wow, that hit hard. The troll armor not doing so well, but that gearing is spotted and definitely becomes kind of a priority target for a couple reasons. If he's allowed to slip away, he's going to get a free kill on that AFK Hindenburg. Or just expose the Hindenburg to fire. And when you start to learn that the enemy team's missing one or two ships, it becomes a lot easier to maybe make an aggressive push, because even if you're down one ship, you know they've only got an equal number in play. And, well, that kind of sucks. Porsche just lost his division mate to that gearing. Well, at least the gearing gets finished off. And here's a situation where the Roon makes itself known. When you do end up in these close situations, you have some very effective torpedoes, and so long as you aim them, they're going to be good. And that Tirpitz just wasted his set. And I find far too many players just aim at the gray line. They look at it, go, that's exactly where I have to put it. You know, I was reading a Reddit post or two today that was talking about people not even realizing that that was a torpedo lead indicator and wondering how their friends were having so much success. But you don't need to just aim at that lead indicator. Look what it's doing. If it's shifting right, you know, look at what the ship you're firing at is doing, what they're likely to do. And that's how you really start landing a lot of volleys. And, well, this Tirpitz is about to eat one more right up the chuff. And he's gonna ground himself, so I think it's safe to say he's probably dead as pretty much all of Porsche's team starts to focus in on him. And, no, Porsche isn't in the best health. Took some big hits from the Tirpitz, and, well, that volley, I can guarantee you the Tirpitz just knew he was dead, so put them in the water as close on the arc as he could. So next up on the team kill list, seems like that Fletcher, good idea, and now the enemy team has no destroyers. And I've mentioned this a number of times, if you can wipe out the destroyers, you take away a huge ability of control. Because DDs can smoke your team, they can provide vision, they can just blockade sections of water by continuously throwing torpedoes. You know, one destroyer on a flank can wreak more havoc than an entire fleet of ships. If they know what they're doing, they play cautiously and just place torpedoes not so much to hit targets, but to kind of mess with them. Like not allow them to turn to get guns into fire, so on and so forth. And well, once again, the game's starting to look like it's in control for Porsche's team. They've got 2 caps, they're ahead by a couple kills. You know, that Moskva is pretty much dead. So you can calm down, you can regroup, and it seems like that's what Porsche is doing. Once again, he's just found a good place where he can fire his guns, or at least could, without any risk of reciprocation, and he's just got to cycle through a few of those repair parties. If you ever find yourself really low down on health, just get space. That's exactly what the Moskva on any enemy team is doing. He was down to 1,000 hit points. He's just driving straight away because, you know, he runs the one heal. He's up to 11,000. That's 10,000 extra hit points. If he can just continue to open, you know, let another minute and a half pass by, he'll have another repair party, and then might be up to, you know, 20,000 health. And the exact same is true for Porsche. See that first repair party just finishing up, and well, unfortunately the second isn't going to offer a ton of hit points, but at least once that repairs up, the second he takes damage, he can start repairing some of it and kind of mitigate how quick he may be losing health. And this Bismarck is just a sitting duck. And one thing the Roon does very well is light fires, and the HE's doing the damage. Now, personally, side on Bismarck like this, I probably would switch to AP at this point. You've got the fire going, let it tick. A lot of battleships I find, you know, let one fire burn, because it kind of makes sense to. The second they get 2, they run that damage control. So if you do light one fire, consider just swapping to AP, doing some damage that way, letting the fire tick for a bit, and then maybe go back to HE. Because I can pretty much guarantee you, now that he's got a second fire lit on that Bismarck, the Bismarck is probably looking to put it out. That said, he may not be able to. So it's kind of hard to know. And here's another fire, and yep, the Bismarck has put him out. So at this point now, yes, HE, really good choice because the Bismarck is gonna burn if you can light one. And while all fire damage is repairable, that assumes they're in the game long enough to run through the cooldowns on the repair party. And you can see it's not just Porsche who has this idea, as that Bismarck is coming under a lot of HE fire. And Porsche's damage total is just slowly creeping up. And that's kind of the thing with cruisers, you know, you're never going to get those like 2 Citadel hits for 30,000 damage, but if you can kind of just keep your guns going, keep putting that pestering damage, because of your rate of fire, it really does add up. And you know, Porsches are coming up on 120k, 14 minutes in, that's like 10,000 damage a minute. That's a respectable amount. And we'll put him right up around the 200,000 damage mark if he can keep that up through the rest of this game. And you kind of expect that to drop off a bit as the game goes on and fewer ships are just around for you to shoot at. But right now the enemy team kind of just seems content to try to run away and just slowly get picked apart. So definitely not a bad place to be. And perhaps this time Porsche's armor will do a little better, and I think it does. The one shell doing about 1,000 damage to him rather than that rather hefty hit the Tirpitz put in earlier. And the big thing to remember right now, 3 ships are spotted down in the south. The Moskva is last seen up here. I can pretty much guarantee you that Moskva's probably jockeying for a position where he can put a lot of long range fire in without kind of taking hits himself, because that's what the Moskva does very well. Sure, it can get in close and absolutely just bow tank, but the Moskva is a very good flanking ship. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Moskva appear back up here, or perhaps somewhere in here, going after this DD that's running the gap. And there he is. So there's just little things that you can be doing in the interludes like this. Look at the map, look at what you see going on, where things were last spotted, and what you think the ship might be doing if you were driving it, or just based on your experience of seeing how they play. And, I mean, he's in a tough situation. The destroyer's got him spotted. He's got a battleship coming. Unlike the Dmitry Donskoy, the Moskva does not have torpedoes. And that kind of puts him at a disadvantage in this situation, so he's got to get moving. Meanwhile, Porsche just goes back to lighting fires and just slowly building damage up. He's found a nice little cove here, gets a shot off, no chance of return fire, and then just drives off. And, you know, as I was saying, there's kind of a way to play this ship, and hit and run, taking those cheeky shots that light a fire and then you drive away and the damage ticks up, really is what the Roon does spectacularly well. And I can guarantee you, having been on the other side, it is so annoying to come up against a well-played Roon, because they do just seem to rack up damage in ways that, you know, maybe some of the other cruisers of this tier don't. But there's a Hindenburg left there, and this is going to be a battle. And, well, the Hindenburg has the advantage of that extra forward turret, and, you know, Porsche does the right thing, comes around the corner, empties his barrels, swaps to AP, because that Hindenburg is giving a lot of side. And unfortunately, I think Porsche is about to eat one of these torpedoes. He might just slip through. He does manage to. And now the big thing is angling. The Hindenburg's fired, get the shots off, he's putting the torpedoes into the water, and hopefully he can reload faster, but you know he's not going to, because it's a Hindenburg. Very similar ship, very similar characteristics. But because of where they are, and the Hindenburg dumping his load a little early, Porsche gets the kill. And with the kill, gets the win, 515,000 credits, 8,100 experience, picks up Dreadnought and a cruiser, which is always nice to see, 180,000 damage, and a lot of shells, got some torpedoes in, but a big part of it was the 12 fires. And I know everyone thinks of the Japanese cruisers, the ships that light the fires, and then these Germans, you just use AP, but the fact is the HE is very effective, and effective enough to get you 662 experience, top of the team, by almost 800 experience, and may have only been 2 kills, but really did help his team win that one, especially when you look at the damage here. You know, a Tirpitz and Bismarck, 50,000-60,000 damage, hits that Hindenburg hard to finish the game, and then just gets a lot of damage to a bunch of different ships. And end of the day, takes home 372,000 credits, the 8,100 experience, 12,000 it looks like for his commander, and just a well-played game. So thank you very much, Porscheracer. To anyone else who has a replay they might like to submit, Qckslvrslash@gmail.com. And if you enjoyed this, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing to the channel. Both help me out. And as always, I'm Qckslvrslash, and I'll have another one for you guys tomorrow.